With us now, Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Welcome back, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Honored to be back on your show, Leland.
All right, pleasure, sir. Last night, we had Mike Huckabee on the program, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, and asked him about what the United Kingdom has just said it would do in terms of recognizing a Palestinian state. Take a listen. Is it fair to say that those three countries have chosen Hamas over Israel?
That's a very fair statement. It sounds harsh, but how else can you interpret it? And by the way, you know who really celebrated those statements that were being made by France and the UK and Canada and the other countries? Hamas. They loved it. They danced in the streets over it. That ought to tell you everything you need to know.
Do you agree that the United Kingdom is now taking the side of Hamas?
Look, I agree completely with what Ms. Huckabee just had to say. This is a ridiculous decision. There's a thing called the Montevideo Convention, which I'm sure you know, which the UK subscribes to. It governs the rules about the recognition of states. And you're not supposed to recognize a state unless it has clearly defined boundaries, which are plainly the so-called state of Palestine does not. And it has a government that is capable of controlling those borders. And part of the government of the putative state of Palestine is the psychotic Islamo-fascist terrorist group Hamas. So, as Mr. Huckabee has just said, what the UK seems to be doing after 22 months in which Israel has been trying to get rid of a neighboring regime that wants to destroy Israel, after 22 months, we seem to be giving a big puff, a big reward to Hamas, and it's absurd.
Why do you think they're doing that? Why would the Prime Minister, who I think has access to the same information you do and did, understands what's happening better than most, just in terms of having access to intelligence and understanding, would he be doing this?
I'll tell you why, and it's very, very sad. It's sickening. It's nothing to do with promoting peace in the Middle East. It's nothing to do with advancing a two-state solution. It's everything to do with the continual oscillation of the Labour Prime Minister between his own two states, a state of paralysed inaction and a state of panic about what's going on in the Labour Party. The problem with the Labour Party, the governing party in our country, is that they're terrified of losing the votes of the Muslim community. It's nothing to do with helping the Palestinians. It's about managing his own party. And that's the real
politicians doing what is in their own political best interest is as old as time, as you and I both know.
I don't think it is, Leland, because I think this will come back to bite him on the butt.
You've been on record saying that you support a two-state solution. You support the idea of the Palestinians having a state. And you rightly point out at the same time that when given effectively a state, which was Gaza, the Palestinians elected Hamas, which is a bunch of Islamist terrorist fanatics. The West Bank, which is run by the Palestinian Authority, isn't much better. They still pay millions of dollars in money that they get from the West in aid to the families of terrorists. What makes you think, and I ask this respectfully, that a Palestinian state is going to work out better than the two quasi-Palestinian states we've already had to?
Look, this isn't going to be a state in the full Weberian sense of a country with the monopoly of legitimate use of violence and everything else. This is going to be, I think, you're going to have some sort of federalized solution where you have a government of a Palestinian entity that has limited but important powers. It doesn't have an army. It doesn't dispose of its own weapons or security, and you leave that to others. But there is a way of doing that. And, you know, some of the stuff that we've heard recently about the future of Gaza, how it could have an amazing future on an amazing part of the world, this Mediterranean coastline, that's true. But, you know, you're not going to achieve it while Hamas is running Gaza.
No, you're not. I want to get back to what's happening in the UK, because I think what is happening in the United Kingdom is a warning sign to what could happen in America, also what's happening in France as well. This is just a little bit of coverage of Israel, Hamas, and the war in the United Kingdom. Take a listen.
Now, a UN-backed monitor has in the last hour said that the worst-case scenario of famine is playing out in the Gaza Strip.
The sheer number of deaths in Gaza is bleak and horrifying, and it also tells the story of this grim war.
What's being described as a limited number of aid trucks have again been entering the territory, but for some, it's too little too late, with the Hamas-run health ministry saying another 14 people have died from malnutrition in the past 24 hours.
Is there any way to describe this other than rank anti-Semitism?
Look, I think that underneath the whole thing, Leland, there certainly is a real element of anti-Semitism. But, you know, what you're seeing here is a lot of stories that, when you dig into them, turn out not to be quite as they seemed at first. Remember the story about the hospital that the Israelis were supposed to have blown up on right in the first month of the war? Turned out not to be true. Just this week, the picture on the front of the New York Times of the little kid who was emaciated, and they said it was starvation. It wasn't starvation. And the New York Times gracefully had to retract that. And time and time again, you're seeing Hamas win the propaganda war. Remember, Hamas started this on October the 7th. They sent those terrorists into Israel to kill, maim, torture as many innocent people as they could, because they knew that Israel would be absolutely bound to launch reprisals, and because they knew that they could weaponize those reprisals to destroy the rapprochement between Israel and the Sunni Muslim states, but also to cost Israel support in the Western world generally. And the tragedy is that we're falling for it. We're falling for it now. And
that's the whole point, right? That leaders are the ones who are supposed to not fall for it. Leaders like yourself are the ones who are supposed to provide moral clarity. And look, to a certain extent, America is not immune from this because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris fell for it as well. But you think about the coverage of this also. Journalists aren't supposed to fall for it either. You pointed out the New York Times rightfully, I think. But even this week, we have these juxtapositions, right, of the UK Prime Minister saying he's going to recognize Palestine, helping Hamas, and one of the British-Israeli hostages who has been released come out and have a blistering statement. As a dual British-Israeli citizenship who survived 471 days in Hamas captivity, I am deeply saddened by your decision to recognize Palestinian statehood. This move does not advance peace. It risks rewarding terror. It sends a dangerous message that violence earns legitimacy. Shame on you. And yet, this continues not only by leadership, but in the media as well. We had the video come out by Islamic Jihad, one of the Hamas other terror groups in Gaza, of a young prisoner hostage who they had taken, who was starving. He said in the video, "I'm hungry, I have no food, I have no water." The terrorists wanted him to say that on TV. That's why they put the video out. And for all the worry about people starving in Gaza, there is zero to no coverage about him starving in Gaza at the hands of Hamas. Why is that?
Because there's total double standards operating. I mean, look, I totally agree with what that hostage said about the coverage of what's been happening in Gaza, and a lot of it is, I'm afraid, exaggerated, and we are falling for it. This is exactly what Hamas wanted to happen.
I think you make a really interesting point, and I didn't quite process it until now, about how the UK Prime Minister is playing to what has become an Islamist Muslim constituency in his country, in your country. That certainly has happened in France with Macron. They said they were going to offer anybody in Gaza a free pass into France. They've now had to realize that was a terrible mistake because of what some of those people have been advocating for in terms of another Holocaust. You see Canada, that has a huge Muslim population, same thing, now saying they're going to recognize Palestine to assuage their Muslim population. Is that a warning for the West and maybe even for the United States?
Look, frankly, I am concerned about this, yes. And I think that Labour is dropping time-honoured government positions because they're worried that the Muslim vote is down to 43% for Labour, rather than 65% or whatever it was, and because they're worried about this new party. And people are forgetting the moral clarity we had 22 months ago, when it was obvious that Israel was going to have to get rid of Hamas because Hamas is committed to this destruction.
What's the warning for America about its Muslim population? Where's this going in the UK?
I just noticed that things are changing a bit, particularly in the Democrat Party. I noticed a change in the conversation about this issue. There is now a constituency that has a particular view, and look, I think it's very, very regrettable.
Yeah, well, go figure, and you explain why. Former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson. It's good to see you.
Boris Johnson is 110% correct. The UK planned recognition of a Palestinian state after the horrific attacks of October 7th is both disgusting and a reward for terrorism. Boris Johnson put it perfectly. It's a shame he's no longer in politics. Keir Starmer is going down the wrong path.